Hello, bienvenue dans le 64e épisode de notre émission Success Story. Nous sommes ravis de vous présenter notre invité spécial, M. Michael GOLDBERG. N'oubliez pas de liker et restez jusqu'à la fin pour ne rien manquer.
Sure, it's wonderful to be here. I'm honored to be on the show and here in Madagascar. My name is Michael GOLDBERG. I'm a professor of entrepreneurship in a city called Cleveland, Ohio, which is in the northern part of the United States, in between New York and Chicago. I work at a university called Case Western Reserve University. It's a private university, about 12,000 students. I grew up in Cleveland, spent my career working in venture capital and in technology and with startups outside of Cleveland, and eventually came back home where I started a venture capital fund, and I've been a professor at Case Western Reserve for the last 10 years. So it was interesting sort of getting my start, first on this sort of corporate tech side. I worked at Microsoft and at America Online, where we had acquired companies. So to some degree I had been in the business, but with a corporate hat of looking at partnering and acquiring startups. I also started my own company and saw firsthand the challenge of coming up with a service for the market and then trying to raise outside capital for that. And then eventually when I set up a venture capital fund with a partner in Israel, so Israel is a very dynamic startup environment, and we decided to set up a venture capital fund to invest in early stage medical technologies, medical device companies that were pre-commercialization in the US. So it was an interesting time to wear a hat of a venture capitalist. I mean, to your question of like, what do venture capitalists look for? I mean, a lot of times it's really about the team. Is the team have the unique assets to really execute on the vision? There's lots of great ideas around there, but if you don't have the team in place to execute on the vision, then the idea is really worth nothing. I think a lot of it is what we call product market fit. Like, does the market really fit with what the product is offering? Because sometimes, as we know, there's some great ideas out there and they just get that timing wrong. The market isn't ready for that product. Venture capitalists tend to look at lots of different businesses. So a typical venture fund may do 1 or 2 investments out of 100 they look at. So it's easy, I think, to say no as a venture capitalist. It's hard to say yes. So you really are looking for that dynamic team and the company that has great product market fit. So a lot of the teaching in entrepreneurship, whether it's done like in a classroom like I do or inside accelerators, is really sort of pushing entrepreneurs to get out and talk to customers. I think there was a school of thought, maybe traditionally, that you should have a secret, work on your business plan in quiet, build a 50-page business plan, and then sort of get ready and just bring it to market. And I think the reality is, much like when you release a piece of software into the market, it's going to still have bugs in it. So you need to get out. A lot of times this is called a minimum viable product. So what can you push out into the marketplace to at least it's a minimum prototype so you can put this in a consumer's hand. Easier to think about sometimes if it's a product, so it could be that app, it could be a physical product, but it could also be a service. I think what's really important for entrepreneurs is to show some customer traction, because I think what can happen is you and I can be having a conversation about a new product or service that I am offering, and you might say, oh yeah, I'm interested in that. And I think sometimes entrepreneurs fail to understand that it's easy to get somebody to be nice, particularly in a place like Madagascar, everybody's so polite. Somebody might say, oh, I'm very interested in your product. And then when it comes down to actually writing a check or paying for that service, they're like, oh, actually, I'm not ready to buy that product or service. So on one hand, you have somebody saying, I'd love to buy it, but when you say, okay, well, give me the money, they're not ready to do it. So I think it's really important for entrepreneurs to get out in the marketplace and show that there's a customer willing to buy their product. Sometimes this can be used as something called a smoke test. Like you can set up a website where, let's say I was selling a product or a service and I said, okay, do you want to buy it? And you sort of click buy. And maybe it's not even ready. You sort of say, okay, well, thanks for your interest in buying, we'll get back to you. But at least there's something about when somebody clicks to buy, that's a big difference between just saying, I might be interested in buying your product or service. I think it's a great question. I mean, I think, yes, early on, talking to potential customers, understanding what they desire is sort of critically important. I think the reality is if entrepreneurs really waited until they were fully ready, they'd just keep waiting. I mean, you're never going to be fully ready, and it takes a certain risk profile from an entrepreneur who says, hey, I'm going to put this out there, even if it's not perfect, and let's sort of see what the market wants. And then that allows you to make adaptations along the way when you need to make those changes. Yeah, I think coming up with a strategy to not only hire but also retain the right team is critically important. I mean, without the right mix of folks. Y Combinator, which is a very famous accelerator out in San Francisco, they always want co-founders. They want a technical co-founder and a business co-founder to launch a business. So obviously it depends on what kind of business or company you have, but if there's a strong technical component to what you're doing, having a couple of people with no technical background can be a real challenge in terms of leading the team. So I think making sure that you have that right blend of experience. I think obviously when you can find team members that have done it before, one of the things that we talked about this week in our workshop here in Tana with folks is in Madagascar, sometimes there's this fear of failure, and if you haven't been successful in your previous business, that you sort of look down at the ground and maybe hard to start your next business. In the US, actually, like if you failed at a business, and I'm talking about it particularly in terms as a team member, you're going to gain tremendous insight. So somebody that sort of had some experience out there, and maybe they've failed at it before, that can be a really valuable insights to bring to the team. No, that's a great question. I mean, I think the marketing and then the broader brand. I mean, oftentimes, and we know this from some of the famous Silicon Valley CEOs, the leader of the organization or team becomes the brand. I mean, we're sitting in the American corner right now. There's a picture of Steve Jobs right across from me. There's these iconic leaders of companies, and they become very associated with the brand. So that, I think there's the brand and the tone that leaders can set, and positioning themselves in the marketplace with a keen eye towards what the market needs and wants. So these are all elements of marketing. It's branding, it's product positioning, it's making sure that you're offering that right product or service to the marketplace. So yeah, I think a deep understanding of marketing is critically important. Beyond Silicon Valley is a course, as you mentioned, that's on Coursera, which is one of the largest platforms for MOOCs, massive open online courses. I developed it after I did some work in Vietnam in 2012. So I was on a Fulbright program you're very familiar with to teach in entrepreneurship in Vietnam. And I was asked there to do a workshop in Vietnam for the Vietnamese government about how they could become more like Silicon Valley. And my reaction was that they actually, Silicon Valley wasn't the best model for them. And Cleveland, which is my hometown, which is not a city that's very well known for entrepreneurship and has a very heavy dose of government and philanthropic support alongside the private sector to really kind of kickstart entrepreneurship and economic development, I thought was a better model. So we did a workshop when we were there. When I got back to the US, I created this MOOC on Coursera that I called Beyond Silicon Valley, which uses Cleveland as a case study. And I think what's been really interesting is that we've taken it out because Coursera is accessible to folks in Madagascar and around the world. We've sort of seen, hey, let's put these tools out there, and it's really a sort of framework for communities that don't have the resources of a Silicon Valley to sort of look at how they might be able to support entrepreneurship. And we've had about 175,000 students take the class over the past 10 years. We have subtitles in 16 languages. We have French, not yet Malagasy. Maybe somebody can volunteer to translate them. But it's been a really interesting experience. I think what we find when you're in a city like Tana, or a city like Cleveland, or a city like Hanoi, it's complicated to get entrepreneurs the support and resources that they need. And it's not necessarily going to be through a private venture capital fund or angel investors or a vibrant accelerator community. And you're going to need to be much more creative in how you support and finance these entrepreneurs. So I was thrilled to get the invitation to put on a program for the U.S. Embassy here. I'm part of a speaker bureau for the U.S. Department of State. And it's my first time in Madagascar, and always had heard about it, but had never been here. Got to spend time with you and 25 other great entrepreneurs here in the capital. Really a wide, diverse, not surprisingly, set of businesses. So anything from a marketing business to a teaching English as a second language business to dried fruit to fashion. So it was really cool meeting entrepreneurs. Lots of obstacles that they were facing, and that's not uncommon anywhere around the world. And sometimes it's regulatory or government obstacles, sometimes it's market obstacles, sometimes obviously COVID provided all sorts of obstacles. So you know, in some ways, I was unfamiliar to Tana and Madagascar because I'd never been here before, but in many ways, sitting with a great group of entrepreneurs this week, there was a certain familiarity and a certain passion that I saw from Malagasy entrepreneurs that have figured out where there might be opportunities. I also saw a really strong spirit of collaboration for the Malagasy entrepreneurs to work together, and talked about things like mentoring and using networks like LinkedIn to build deeper connectivity. So it was great. I really look forward to keeping in touch with the entrepreneurs that I met and seeing where they take their businesses. Sure. Yeah, and then maybe I'll characteristics or competencies. I mean, one, and we talked about it this week, is humility. I mean, I think entrepreneurs that don't have a huge ego, that are willing to listen to their customers, willing to listen to their advisors, I'd really put at the top of my list. A lot of the entrepreneurs that I've seen most successful have a certain humility, and they're not driven by ego. I think the grit that entrepreneurs need, because you know that things aren't going to come easy, and you're going to have to persevere if entrepreneurs are not willing to keep pivoting and weaving and seeing where the market opportunities. So I'd put that sort of near the top of my list as well. I think having a sense of humor is really important. We had a lot of laughs here this week with the entrepreneurs as we talked about the situation. I mean, you can't take yourself too seriously, because if you do, you'd get really depressed. So I think having a good sense of humor. I think the commitment to networking, not only in building a strong network, but willing to share your network with others. I think within entrepreneurship, there's this sort of give first, give to others. So today it may be you helping me, tomorrow maybe me helping you. So I think it's sort of building that network. And I guess as a fifth characteristic, I I think just sort of a desire to learn. Like, you know, we talked today about a lot of the resources that are out there, whether they're MOOCs or other podcasts, things like what you're doing here. You know, we're lifelong learners, and if somebody thinks that they know everything, they're probably not going to be very successful. You got to keep being hungry for knowledge and for learning.
Corban œuvre dans tout ce qui est conseil RH, formation, coaching, mentoring des startups et externalisation de paix. Nous pouvons aussi vous aider dans l'élaboration de business models et de business plans. Si vous avez des projets de vidéo marketing, nous pouvons également vous offrir nos services.